Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Okay, crazy fact right off the bat, did you know your brain is actually predicting the end of this sentence before I even finish speaking? It's true. Today, we're going to completely dismantle a super common misconception, the idea that reading is just, looking at words on a page and passively soaking up their meaning. We're moving way past just looking at surface symbols to uncover how we actually construct meaning. It is a wildly fascinating journey into the human mind.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our cognitive roadmap for today. First, the invisible engine. Then, the guessing game. After that, depths of comprehension, followed by clashing reading theories, and we'll wrap it all up with the metacognitive consensus.
Section 1. The invisible engine.
To get us started, I want to pose a question directly to you, and I really want you to think about this. If two people read the exact same book, literally, every single word is identical, will they construct exactly the same meaning?
Well, the answer is a resounding no. And that's because of something called schema, basically our interlocking mental structures built from our past experiences. Think of it like this. If a book mentions the word dog, someone who grew up with a tiny poodle is going to picture something completely different than someone who raised a massive pit bull, right? The author just provides the blueprint, you provide the materials. Because you and I have totally different life experiences, our building materials are different, which means the final structure, our actual understanding, is going to look different too.
This perfectly illustrates the difference between reading as a product versus reading as a process. Reading as a product is just the static, visible outcome, like getting the correct answer on a multiple-choice quiz. It's a finished, solid block. But reading as a process, that is the invisible engine. It's your brain actively deciphering marks, reflecting on ideas, monitoring difficulty, and integrating new concepts on the fly.
Section 2. The guessing game.
Now, take a look at this quote from researcher Ken Goodman. It perfectly captures a really counterintuitive idea. He says, reading is a selective process. It involves partial use of available minimal language cues selected from perceptual input on the basis of the reader's expectation. Okay, so did you catch that? He's basically saying you aren't actually reading every single letter, or honestly, even every single word. Reading is essentially a psycholinguistic guessing game driven by what you expect to see next. Your brain is basically skimming for clues, filling in the blanks before your eyes even fully process the letters. Wild, right?
And this whole guessing game happens in literal fractions of a second, broken down into 4 continuous phases. First up, expectation. Your background knowledge anticipates what's coming next. Then, sampling. Your eyes quickly grab partial, minimal language cues from the text. Third is prediction. Your brain makes a rapid-fire guess at the meaning. And finally, confirmation, or correction, to lock it in and refine those quick hypotheses.
All of this forms a continuous, lightning-fast loop. You are not a passive receiver. You are an active decoder. You expect, you sample, you predict, and you confirm. If a prediction is wrong, like say you misread a word and suddenly the sentence makes 0 sense, your brain flags it, loops back, samples again, and corrects it. You are constantly making and testing hypotheses as you read.
Section 3. Depths of comprehension.
Now, I want you to think about the last 3 things you read today. Maybe it was the label on your morning coffee, an email from your boss, or maybe a news article. Mentally map them onto this quadrant. We generally read for 4 main purposes. In the top left, we have pleasure or enjoyment. That's your surface-level leisure, like a fun beach read. Top right is practical application, so functional reading at work, or maybe looking up a recipe. Bottom left takes us deeper into critical understanding, where you're analyzing a text for bias or underlying arguments. And the bottom right is academic learning, where you're acquiring complex new information to expand your worldview. And the cool thing is, we shift our cognitive strategies depending on where we are on this map. As we navigate these different purposes, our comprehension actually plunges to different depths. Tier 1 is literal recognition, just reading the lines, grasping basic facts and sequences. But plunge deeper to Tier 2, interpretive recognition. This is reading between the lines, inferring what the author meant but didn't explicitly say. And finally, we hit the very bottom, Tier 3, connective and critical recognition. This is reading beyond the lines. This is where you generate new thoughts, synthesize knowledge, and evaluate the text from an entirely new perspective.
Section 4. Clashing reading theories.
Historically, there have been 2 starkly contrasting camps regarding how we construct all this meaning. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the visual contrast. The bottom-up view treats reading like a funnel. It's a text-driven process that says reading starts at the very bottom, with letters and sounds, phonics. You build words, then sentences, and eventually comprehension pops out the top.
In this view, the reader is kind of a passive processor. But the top-down, cognitive view flips this entirely into a spotlight. It says reading is comprehension-driven. You start with your background knowledge up top, make predictions, and construct meaning downward onto the text, filling in the blanks automatically. So to briefly summarize this battle of theories, bottom-up relies on the printed text, driving the process, moving from the parts to the whole, and treating you as a passive decoder relying heavily on phonics. On the flip side, top-down argues that your mind is the primary driver, moving holistically from meaning down to word verification, treating you as an active predictor relying on schema activation and inferencing.
Section 5. The Metacognitive Consensus.
Well, as it turns out, both theories were partially right, but kind of incomplete on their own. Modern cognitive science shows us that proficient reading is actually an interactive process. It combines the bottom-up data coming from the text with the top-down predictions coming from your schema. And the magic ingredient tying the whole shebang together? The executive brain, which actively supervises the entire operation through metacognition, which, simply put, is just thinking about your own thinking.
This executive brain acts like the CEO of your mind, directing operations in 3 specific phases. Before you even start reading, you plan, you activate your background knowledge, and figure out your purpose. During reading, you monitor, kind of like a driver adjusting their speed on a curvy road. You check your understanding, regulate your pace, and correct your hypotheses if you guessed a word wrong. And after reading, you evaluate, synthesizing the information and reviewing the meaning against your original purpose. So the crucial point is, to synthesize our entire deconstruction today, reading is an incredibly active psycholinguistic guessing game adapted for distinct purposes. Comprehension plunges from the literal lines to the interpretive spaces between to the critical spaces beyond, requiring simultaneous top-down and bottom-up processing, all actively supervised by metacognition.
We've moved far beyond just looking at surface symbols. Reading is a highly complex, dynamic architecture of meaning construction. Knowing this incredible invisible engine exists in all of us, I want to leave you with this final thought. Knowing all of this, how will you guide others to build their own meaning today? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring the depths of what you read.